Hey guys, how you doing today? Um, I am sitting beside my open window enjoying the fresh air today. Hope you have a chance to get outside at some point because it's supposed to be nice over the next few days. All right, before we get started with today's focus, we're going to do a quick review of Federalist and Anti-Federalist. This was an assignment that you had a few days ago, and I want to just go back and do a quick review. All right, so Federalists were those who supported the Constitution. They liked the ideas that we had put into it. The Anti-Federalists were going to be those that opposed the Constitution. Even after the Constitution was written, we were going to have these two political parties start to develop, and they are going to struggle against each other. These two groups argued for their position. They wrote newspapers, magazines, and pamphlets. Now, why didn't they put out what they had on the news media, social media, and the internet? If you said it's because it was 1788 and they didn't have that yet, you are correct. Okay, so some of the big ideas. Federalists believed in big government. That kind of sounds a lot like what the Democratic Party today is all about. The Anti-Federalists supported small government. Again, really similar to the way that the Republicans tend to feel today. But the Anti-Federalists are going to be led by Thomas Jefferson and included farmers and small landowners who believed that the nation's future rested on agriculture. Again, does this sound a little bit like the Republican Party today? The Anti-Federalists are going to argue things like they felt like the Constitutional Convention went beyond what they were charged to do. They felt like a strong national government was going to destroy the states' ability to make their own laws and to have their own rights to choose. They felt like this big government idea was too much like a monarchy, and it gave too much power to the big government. And they really strongly argued to have that Bill of Rights, that first 10 amendments, put into the Constitution to protect individual freedoms. The Federalists are going to argue that the new nation needed an effective national government to handle the nation's economy. They felt like if we didn't come together and try to establish economy over everyone, it was just going to fall apart. We needed a monetary system. Remember, every state had their own type of money, and we needed one system of money. They took that name Federalist, and it showed that link to federalism. And that idea of federalism, if you remember, is that shared power. So they wanted to share power with the states and the government. They didn't want to just give all of the power to the states. All right, Federalists that are going to lead this party are going to be Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, Ben Franklin, and James Madison. Now, they list George Washington here, but remember, he's primarily an independent. However, one thing we're going to learn about him is that he really liked Alexander Hamilton a lot. He trusted in him. And so he is going to basically go along with whatever Alex tells him to do. If Alex thinks it's a good idea, George Washington is going to say, great, let's do it. We're going to find out more about how that affects some of the decisions that come down from George later. All right. They're going to write a series of articles called the Federalist Papers, where they're trying to convince people that this new Constitution is the way to go. This is the best way to organize the government. And so they're going to try to build people or to get people on board with their idea. They end up with this spirit of compromise. So in order to ratify or get every 13 colonies, all the 13 colonies, to agree to the Constitution, they're going to have to find a way to compromise. So they do that through the Bill of Rights, which you guys have already learned about with the 10 amendments. Once they added those in, then the states are going to decide to go ahead and sign off on the Constitution, and let's get rolling. So Delaware is going to be the first to ratify, followed by New Hampshire. It was the ninth and decisive state. North Carolina became the 12th state to ratify the Constitution when they finally approved the document on November 21st. And then Rhode Island was actually the last to ratify in 1790. All right, this, if you want to take a quick look, pause this video. This will show you the dates that each of the different colonies finally agreed to the Constitution. And once it was done, we were able to get rolling with the Constitution and the new government. All right, now I'm going to flip back over to our slideshow. So our goal for today is to focus on those precedents that were set by the Founding Fathers as they established the new government. Now, I just told you, those Federalists and Anti-Federalists, those are going to be the Founding Fathers I'm talking about. So George Washington is one of them. He's going to set precedents. We've already learned about some of those. But Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, John Jay, there are many others that you've already started looking at names and finding names of those people that are going to be considered our Founding Fathers. Remember, that precedent is that tradition that's set by other people. And the first tradition that George Washington is going to set is he's going to say, I can't do this on my own. I need to create a cabinet of advisors. Secondly, all right, what's that word precedent mean? Precedent means the traditions set by George Washington. So the first one he's going to determine is, what are we going to call you, George? And what did we decide to call him? This one, Your Highness? No, of course not. Your Excellency? Nope. Your Exalted Highness. All right, how about this one? His Highness, the President of the United States and the Protector of the Rights of the Same. No, that's way too long. Okay, so he said, how about just call me Mr. President? All right, so that's going to be the first thing that we're going to call him is Mr. President. Next thing, he's going to be one of the first presidents that, you know what, he does not like spending all of his time working. He wants to get away, and he has a beautiful plantation called Mount Vernon. And so he's going to make it acceptable to actually go home and leave office to go find a retreat somewhere else to get away for a while. Now, today, a lot of the presidents that get voted into office already have a home somewhere else, and they come and live at the White House for the 4 years that they are president. So while they're at the White House, they can actually go back home to where they are originally from, to their original homes, because they don't just get rid of those. But they also retreat to other places like Martha's Vineyard. There's a very nice little place that presidents can go to. It's kind of like their getaway retreat. All right, the other thing that George Washington is going to do to set a precedent is he's going to say, enough is enough. I have helped this country for so long, but I'm going to have to put my foot down about how long I'm going to actually work. So he's going to set a 2-term limit, okay? Each term is 4 years. So after 8 years, he said, this is enough. I want to go home and retire. Okay, I want you to pause the video right here and see if you can go back and name at least 3 of the precedents that were set by George Washington. All right. Now, moving on. One of the next precedents that George is going to set is he is going to believe that it's important to keep the Americans informed about what's going on in their government and how the government is helping them. They're so worried about this big government taking over. So he's saying, you know what, let's actually just inform the people. Let's tell them what our government is doing so they can quit worrying so much. So he decided each year that they were going to give a State of the Union address. And this is a tradition that all of the presidents after him have continued. So when this video is over, you're going to go to Edpuzzle and watch a short Edpuzzle about State of the Union address. So this is the video that you're going to watch in just a minute, but not yet. All right, another precedent that he set was also to figure out what the role is for the vice president. Now, what happened if George died? He had to figure that out because we can't just leave the country in turmoil. So there were 2 jobs that the vice president was going to have. The first one is that he was going to be the leader of the Senate. So really his job is only if the Senate, which remember the Senate has 2 people per state. So that gives them an even 50 senators in the Senate. So they would need somebody to break ties if they were to happen to have a tie. So they decided, you know what, let's put the vice president in charge of that. We'll call him the president of the Senate, and he can break any ties. Secondly, he can take over for the president if for some reason he's not able to continue his duty. So if he gets sick, if he has surgery, if he dies, if he's assassinated, he can take over. The first vice president under George Washington was going to be a man named John Adams. All right, I just want to give you a quick history. So there are several presidents of the past that had to have vice presidents take over for them. So the first one is William Harrison. He actually died of pneumonia only 31 days after he was elected. Funny story about this guy. They worked really hard to get him into office, and people didn't want to vote him in because they said he was too old to be president. And they said, no, he'll be great, he'll be great. 31 days after he got elected to office, he died of pneumonia. Oops. This was his VP, John Tyler, that took over and served for the next 4 years for him. All right, Zachary Taylor died of food poisoning. Ugh, what a way to go. And his VP, Millard Fillmore, took over. Abe Lincoln, of course, was assassinated, very famous, and so you guys probably know that story. You've heard it before. His vice president, Andrew Johnson, actually took over for him and finished out his term. James Garfield was also assassinated at the age of 49, so his vice president had to take over for him. Now, what happens when a president is assassinated or dies in office is when the VP takes over, they finish out that 4-year term. So let's say the president had already served 2 years, the remaining 2 years would be led by the vice president. Let's say, like William Harrison, he died just 31 days after he was elected. That means John Tyler, his vice president, took over for the next 4 years until there was a new election. All right, other people that died in office. William McKinley was also assassinated. So we're up to 3 presidents that have been assassinated. You may only really remember that there was one that we know of, or maybe 2. So the most famous ones, of course, Abe Lincoln, and then we're going to look at the next one in a minute. William McKinley is going to be replaced by Theodore Roosevelt, who's going to take over, and then he's going to go on to win the next presidential election, so he'll actually become a president too. And then Warren Harding had a stroke, so Calvin Coolidge had to take over for him. Franklin D. Roosevelt died of a cerebral hemorrhage, which is a brain hemorrhage. So he died in office of a brain hemorrhage, and Harry S. Truman had to take over for him. And finally, probably the most recent and one that you're also familiar with is JFK. He was assassinated in a parade, and his vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson, took over him and finished his term. Richard Nixon was the only president to resign the office, which means he stepped down when he was voted out. And so his vice president, Gerald Ford, took over for him. Richard Nixon was impeached, and this was actually the case. If you look at the blue box, you can take a minute to pause and read, but he was actually convicted of a crime during the Watergate scandals, which is why they voted to impeach him and kick him out of office. All right, so currently in office, we have these 2 men, Donald Trump and Mike Pence. But of course, running for or trying to decide, and as of Friday afternoon, we don't really know who the new vice president is going to be. So we will have to wait and find out for sure. All right, so adding to our list of precedences, we're going to put in that annual State of the Union, and then we're going to add in the vice president. So the next thing that we're going to do to set a precedent is to create the roles of the vice president, and he's going to take over for the president if he is sick or dies, or is impeached or resigns from office. All right, I want you to stop again. Can you name the new precedents that we set for the executive branch? Pause the video and practice. If you don't remember, go back and look. All right, the third part of this is going to be the precedents that we set for the judicial branch. Now, we've already know some things about the Constitution. So we already know at this point the Founding Fathers have determined how to fairly represent states in Congress. So they've set up the legislative branch. They've set up the executive branch, and they figured out the roles for the president and the roles for the vice president, the roles for the cabinet. So we are finally left at the judicial branch. We're going to have to figure out what specifically is going to be the role of the Supreme Court versus the other courts. All right, so at this time, states and counties already had their own judges in their court system. So this was Callaway County Courthouse. It was actually built in 1939. But the problem was they didn't want to give up this power to a federal government. Each state and county wanted to keep its own court systems and judges. They already had stuff that worked. But the country needed a court to actually rule over the states. So a higher court than just the states, somebody who could keep the states in check as well and make sure that the laws that the states were making were constitutional. So this is where the 1789 Judiciary Act established the U.S. federal court system. So Article 3 of the Constitution established the Supreme Court. All right, so the Supreme Court is the highest law in the land. Okay, it's going to actually establish 3 judges, provide 13 district courts, and 3 circuit courts. It's also going to create that position of attorney general. Attorney general, just like it says, attorney is a lawyer for the country. So currently, this is our Chief Justice as of 2019. His name is John Roberts. So he currently sits as the Chief Justice in charge of the Supreme Court. We have our 9 Supreme Court justices. Now, this one is Ruth Ginsburg, who just died this past year, and so she's currently being replaced. This is our current Attorney General as of 2019. His name is William Barr, and he is the main legal advisor to the government. All right, so what was the name of the courts? The highest court in the land is you guessed it, Supreme Court. It is the highest court in the country. All right, now here's what the Supreme Court can do. Once states have, each state has their own courts. And so once a court has made a decision, if the defendant feels like that they have been wrongly accused, they can have their cases appealed, which means that they can have their cases heard again by a new court to render a new verdict. Okay, so what happens is the Supreme Court is only going to hear certain cases. It can't hear every case that needs to be appealed. Okay, but it's going to take decisions that states make. So let's say a state makes a decision about a new law they want to make, but whoever is affected by that law can actually take that to court, to the Supreme Court, and appeal it and say, we don't feel this was a fair judgment made by the states, so we would like for you to hear this court case again. So they can overturn state decisions that are being made. All right, how many justices did we say there are on the Supreme Court? If you said 9, you are correct. All right, so here's just a quick layout. If we start down here with the trial court, this is your typical Judge Judy case. It hears either criminal or civil cases and deals verdicts. Then, if someone who is judged by Judge Judy is not happy with their outcome of their case, they can appeal their case. So they might appeal to the State Court of Appeals. They hear appeals from trials on a case-by-case basis, and then they can apply, or they can appeal to the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the land. Same thing, if you want to pause this video, you can take a look at this and kind of look at the different ways that things are appealed, decisions are appealed in the court system, and which ones go to the Supreme Court. Now, if we start down at the bottom at this number 1, trial court, that was that Judge Judy court. So possibly with the help of a jury, the trial court will make a record of the facts after weighing the evidence and issue a legal opinion. So this could be Judge Judy, but it could also be a jury trial. Now, the appellate court considers whether the trial court applied the law correctly. So if for some reason the person who, the defendant did not like the results of their case, they could appeal their case to an appellate court. So they're going to hear their case again. They're going to look and see, did the judge or the jury apply the law correctly? And then unless evidence exists that the trial court was wrong, okay, even if the appellate court was wrong, that doesn't mean the Supreme Court will overturn its decision. The Supreme Court chooses which cases it hears out of a very large pool of appeals. So the highest court is the Supreme Court, and it's kind of the court of last resort, meaning that it can hear it offers litigants a final chance to convince a judge that the lower court decided the case wrongly. So the Supreme Court has the final say on issues of federal law, but the state Supreme Courts have the last word on state law. So basically what this means is that the Supreme Court has it basically hears only those cases that are being appealed where they feel that states or lower courts have made incorrect decisions. All right, so in this one, we have federal courts. So federal courts are going to hear federal cases that cross state boundaries or cases involving violations of the Constitution or federal law. So when we talk about those other federal courts, they're hearing other cases that involve across a state. So maybe it's like a case where it's Missouri and Kansas that are being sued because of something. That would be a federal case because it involves more than just one state. All right. And then, of course, they created the Attorney General, which is the law and advisor for the country. All right, so that wraps up a little bit about our precedents that were set about the judiciary system. So what I want you to do after you finish this is you are going to open up the Google form and you're going to go back and answer the questions in Google form. You can rewatch this video and stop and start it as often as you need to find the answers to the questions because all of the answers are here. Then you're also going to want to watch that Edpuzzle video on the State of the Union. Have a great day, guys.